I grew up in a modest two-bedroom house in Des Moines, Iowa, with my brother Lucas. We shared everything: bunk beds, toys, chores, even dreams. Our parents weren't wealthy. Dad was a mechanic and Mom worked part-time at a diner. Life was never luxurious, but it was filled with the kind of closeness that money can't buy. Lucas was 3 years older than me. As the big brother, he was my hero. He taught me how to ride a bike, patched me up after playground fights, and defended me from bullies. In our small, sun-bleached backyard, we built forts out of old boxes and swore blood oaths to always stick together. One evening, when I was 9 and Lucas was 12, we sat on the cracked steps of our porch, watching the sunset bleed into the Iowa cornfields. Lucas turned to me and said, "One day, you and me, Nate, we're gonna buy a house. Not some rental dump. Our own place." "Yeah?" I asked, my voice small but hopeful. "Yeah. Big kitchen. Big backyard. No landlord banging about late rent." I nodded solemnly, sealing the promise in my heart. As we grew older, that childish dream matured right alongside us. Teenage years, first jobs, college courses, none of it dulled that vision we shared. Even as life tugged us in different directions, we clung to the idea of someday living under the same roof again, only this time by choice, not necessity. Lucas, always more ambitious than me, went into real estate flipping right after high school. He wasn't rich, but he was clever, buying rundown properties, fixing them up, and selling for modest profits. Meanwhile, I pursued a steadier path, studying mechanical engineering and eventually working as a technician at a heavy machinery company. Despite our busy lives, we kept the dream alive. Every Sunday night without fail, we'd meet at Patty's Diner on 5th Street. The place was dingy, the coffee terrible, but it was ours, a sacred ritual. Over greasy burgers and cold fries, we mapped out our future. "We need a big garage for your projects," Lucas would say, sketching floor plans on napkins. "And a deck," I'd add. "Big enough for a grill. Maybe even a hot tub." We laughed. We dreamed. We saved. After nearly 7 years of hard work and tighter-than-tight budgets, opportunity finally knocked. The housing market took a dip. Lucas stumbled upon a listing, a weathered 2-story colonial on the edge of town. Faded blue paint, cracked driveway, overgrown lawn, but the bones were good. "This is it, Nate," he said, excitement flashing in his eyes. The house was listed at $280,000. We could just barely make it work. We toured it together one drizzly Saturday afternoon. The floors creaked under our boots. The kitchen smelled faintly of mildew. Rain leaked through a crack in the gutter. And yet, standing there, soaked and shivering, I saw it. I saw everything we had ever dreamed of. We sat on the sagging porch steps, just like when we were kids, and shook on it. We pooled our savings, a combined $56,000, for the down payment and to cover the renovations. Lucas suggested he handle the mortgage paperwork. "Easier this way," he said, grinning. "Banks like dealing with one name. Less hassle." I hesitated for half a heartbeat. Something gnawed at me, a whisper I couldn't quite catch. But then I looked at him, my brother, my blood. The one who carried me home when I fell off my bike, the one who taught me how to tie a fishing line. How could I doubt him? "Sure," I said. "Whatever works." We sealed the deal with a handshake and a hug. I remember thinking, this is the start of something good. Finally. The months that followed were brutal and beautiful. Every weekend, we labored side by side, ripping up old carpets, sanding floorboards, patching walls, hauling debris. My palms blistered. My back screamed. But every bruise and ache felt like a badge of honor. We weren't just fixing a house. We were building a life. We even threw a small housewarming party, pizza on paper plates, folding chairs scattered around a half-finished living room. Friends toasted to the Johnson brothers' new castle, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt anchored. Nights were filled with barbecue smoke, video game marathons, endless talks on the back porch. We made plans for garden beds, for building a workshop out back. When autumn came, we cobbled together a fire pit from leftover bricks. Sitting there, roasting marshmallows under the vast Iowa stars, I looked across the flames at Lucas and thought. We did it. We kept our promise. At least, that's what I believed. It wasn't like the house turned cold overnight. It was small things at first. Things so tiny they barely registered until it was too late. Lucas started calling the shots on everything. We should move the couch here, he'd say, and even if I disagreed, it somehow always ended up where he wanted it. At first, it felt like typical older brother bossiness. Harmless. But then he began making bigger decisions without asking me. One evening, I came home after a late shift to find he'd painted the living room a ghastly shade of beige. No discussion. No heads up. Just, done. Thought I'd surprise you, he said, grinning. I laughed it off. What else could I do? Then came the bills. Every month, we'd agreed to split utilities. But slowly, he started forgetting to reimburse me. I'd cover the internet, the water, the trash collection, always expecting he'd send me his share. I'll get you next week, he'd say. Tight month, he'd mumble. Next week never came. I didn't want to seem petty. I kept telling myself, he's my brother. He'll settle up eventually. And then came Rachel. She was everything Lucas wasn't, polished, sharp, ambitious. Her family came from old money, the kind that wore wealth like invisible crowns. When Rachel entered the picture, everything shifted. Lucas spent more nights at her downtown condo than at our house. When he was home, he acted like a guest, not a co-owner. He'd bring Rachel over without warning, criticize how small and outdated everything was. I overheard them once through the thin walls. You deserve better, babe, Rachel cooed. You should get a real house. I'm working on it, Lucas said. The words sliced through me. Wasn't this our real house? One afternoon, I stumbled across some papers on the kitchen counter. Loan documents, insurance forms, all in Lucas's name alone. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. A gnawing worry bloomed in my gut. I told myself I was overthinking. That this was how brothers operated. That trust meant not needing constant reassurance. Still, a voice inside me whispered, check. One rainy night, curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. I logged onto the county's property records website. There it was, in black and white. The house, our house, was legally owned by Lucas Johnson. Sole owner. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My stomach churned. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a paperwork error. Maybe he'd add me later. Maybe. The next morning, I confronted him. Hey, man, I started casually, heart hammering in my chest. I was looking up some stuff online, and I noticed the house is just in your name. Lucas didn't even blink. Yeah. That's what we agreed, remember? For the loan. But, legally? He shrugged. Legal, Schmiegal. You're my brother. You live here. What does it matter whose name is on a piece of paper? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But something inside me, something old, something primal, twisted painfully. Weeks passed. Lucas grew more distant. Rachel's visits became more frequent. They whispered behind closed doors. Shared glances over dinner. And then, one afternoon, I came home to find a "For Rent" sign hammered into our front lawn. I stood there, soaked in sweat and disbelief, staring at the sign as if it were in a foreign language. Inside, Lucas lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone. What's this? I demanded, voice trembling. He looked up, utterly nonchalant. I'm renting it out, he said. Renting. Our house. My house, he corrected, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. You can't just. I can, he interrupted sharply. It's my name on the deed. You don't have any rights here. I opened my mouth. Closed it. No words came. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Nate, he said, voice almost gentle. You've got 30 days. 30 days to pack up 7 years of dreams. 30 days to accept that blood meant nothing. I walked upstairs in a daze, each step heavier than the last. In the room we once painted together, under the ceiling we once patched side by side, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the betrayal seep into my bones. Outside the window, the "For Rent" sign flapped mockingly in the wind. I tried to fight it. God knows, I tried. The next morning after seeing that "For Rent" sign, I sat down at the kitchen table, heart pounding in my chest, and laid it all out for Lucas. Lucas, please. This was supposed to be ours. We dreamed about this since we were kids. I've put my soul into this place. He didn't look up from his phone. Dreams change, Nate. I wanted to scream. To shake him until the old Lucas, my brother, came back. Instead, I begged. Give me some time. Let me buy in properly. I'll get a loan. I'll pay you half. He sighed dramatically, like I was an annoying customer at a store. It's already in motion. I've got a lease signing next week. Lease signing. For strangers. In the house we bled and sweated over. I spent the next few days scrambling. I met with banks, trying to get a mortgage approved. Without the house in my name, it was impossible. I was a ghost. A squatter. Even though half my savings, my labor, my hopes were sunk into these walls. At night, I'd sit alone in the living room, tracing cracks in the ceiling with my eyes, wondering how the hell it had come to this. Lucas barely came home. When he did, he avoided me. Rachel, though, she was around. Acting like she already owned the place. Measuring the kitchen for renovations. Flipping through paint samples. Every time I saw her smug smile, it felt like another knife twisting deeper into my ribs. One evening, a couple came by for a tour. I watched from the top of the stairs as Lucas showed them around like a proud real estate agent. Great backyard, he said. Perfect for barbecues. The backyard where he and I had planted those damn apple trees. Finished basement, he added. We just remodeled. I clutched the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. They loved it, of course. Signed the lease on the spot. 2 months rent up front. Lucas grinned all night. I started packing that same night. What else could I do? 30 days. That was the law. That was all he was obligated to give me. I boxed up my books, my clothes, the little trophies and knickknacks that had made the house feel like a home. Every item I touched carried memories. Every tape mark on the wall, every scuff on the floor. Gone. All of it. At night, I sat on the floor of my emptying bedroom, staring at the pale rectangles where my posters used to hang. It felt like erasing myself. 1 week before move-out day, I made one last attempt. We sat on the porch steps, the same porch where we'd sworn to buy a house together, so many years ago. Lucas, please, I said, my voice hoarse. Doesn't any of it mean anything to you? For a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw hesitation in his eyes. Then he laughed. You're too sentimental, Nate. That's why you'll never get ahead. He clapped me on the back, like he was doing me a favor. Grow up. That was the last conversation we had before I left. When moving day came, it rained. Of course it rained. I hauled my battered suitcases down the steps, soaking wet, as Lucas sipped coffee under the porch awning, dry and smug. Not once did he offer to help. Not once did he say goodbye. I loaded my life into the back of my rusted pickup and drove away, the "For Rent" sign growing smaller in my rearview mirror. It wasn't just a house I lost. It was my brother. And some wounds never heal. I thought about fighting. God, I thought about it every second of every miserable day after I left that house. I went to see a lawyer, scraping together the little cash I had left. His office smelled like mildew and regret. He wore a tired suit and had the kind of eyes that had seen too many lost causes walk through his door. I told him everything. From the handshake at Patty's diner to the night sanding floors, to Lucas's betrayal. When I finished, the lawyer leaned back, hands folded. "You have no claim," he said simply. "But, the money I put in, the work." He shook his head. "No contract. No receipts. No emails. No text messages acknowledging a partnership. You're nothing but a roommate in the eyes of the law. A ghost." Again. "You could try suing," he added, almost like an afterthought. "But it'd cost more than you'd ever get back. And it'd tear your family apart. Tear it apart. As if there was anything left to tear." I left his office feeling hollow, smaller somehow. Like I'd been crumpled up and tossed aside. I thought about talking to Mom and Dad. Surely they'd see how wrong this was. Surely they'd make Lucas make it right. I drove to their house, rehearsing my speech over and over in my head. But when I sat across from them at the kitchen table, pouring out everything, they just exchanged tired glances. "Nathan," my father said, "sometimes life isn't fair." "Lucas worked hard for what he has," Mom added. "Maybe it's time you focus on your own path." Focus on my own path. Like I hadn't spent the last decade building that house, that dream, with every penny and every ounce of strength I had. I realized then that they had already chosen. Chosen the son with the polished shoes and the real estate empire over the one who fixed trucks and lived above a garage. I left without finishing my coffee. The days blurred together after that. I bounced from couch to couch, sometimes sleeping in my truck when money got too tight. I picked up extra shifts at the mechanic's shop, my hands always stained with grease, my back always aching. Every night, I drive past that old house. Lights on. New tenants inside. Curtains drawn where mine had once fluttered in the breeze. A new mailbox. A different car in the driveway. It was like I had never existed there. Like I had been erased. Sometimes, I wondered if that's what Lucas had wanted all along. Not just the house. But to erase me, too. I told myself I would move on. I told myself I would let it go. But the truth was, part of me died on that porch. The part that believed family was forever. The part that trusted without question. The part that called Lucas, brother. Time blurred after that. Days folded into weeks, then months. I found a cheap studio apartment above a mechanic's shop on the east side of town. The ceilings leaked when it rained. The radiator clanged like a church bell in winter. Cockroaches claimed the corners before I could unpack. But it was mine. I threw myself into work. 12-hour shifts at the garage, sometimes more. I learned to live with the ache in my back and the grit under my fingernails. Some nights I would fall asleep still wearing my boots, too tired to care. Lucas's name was everywhere now. Billboards. Park benches. Local TV commercials. Lucas Johnson Realty, making dreams come true. The same man who stole mine. Sometimes I'd see him on TV, flashing that perfect smile, shaking hands with clients, cutting ribbons at grand openings. His suits got sharper, his hair shinier. He started driving a Tesla. Meanwhile, I drove a battered pickup whose driver's side door had to be kicked open from the inside. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel bitterness then. I'd drive past our house occasionally, just to torture myself. The place looked different now, new siding, manicured lawn, fancy porch lights. Strangers' laughter spilled from the backyard where Lucas and I had once roasted marshmallows. It was like we'd never been there at all. Sometimes I wondered if I had made the whole thing up. If the childhood dreams, the blood oaths on the playground, the promises whispered over diner coffee, had all been illusions I built to comfort myself. Other times, I wondered if Lucas had ever meant them at all. Maybe he did. Maybe we both did. But life has a way of sanding down ideals, wearing them away until all that's left is ambition and the cold, hard logic of survival. I stayed quiet. I didn't confront him again. I didn't crash any family gatherings. I didn't post angry rants online. I simply disappeared. Friends drifted away. Some couldn't understand why I wouldn't let it go. Others were quietly loyal to Lucas, who could afford nicer gifts at Christmas. Loneliness became a second skin. But slowly, quietly, I built a new life. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was mine. I saved what I could. I fixed up my truck. I started taking night classes at the community college. Studying business, of all things. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was pride. But I was determined that if I ever owned something again, it would be in my name, no handshakes, no blind trust, no room for betrayal. I wouldn't be a ghost anymore. I wouldn't let anyone erase me again. It happened 5 years later. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't hoping for it. Life had become simple: work, study, sleep, repeat. But one evening, my boss at the garage dragged me to a local real estate networking event. "Good way to meet people," he said. "You never know who'll need a good mechanic." I wore my best jeans, the ones without oil stains, and a button-up shirt I'd ironed twice. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping onto another planet. Suits, polished shoes, clinking glasses, hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. And there he was. Lucas. Standing under a chandelier, laughing with a group of investors. His hair slicked back, his suit cutting clean lines, his watch catching the light like a mirror to another life. For a moment, I froze. I could have turned around. Slipped out the side door. Pretended I never saw him. But something rooted me to the spot. He caught sight of me. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked by a wide, empty smile. "Nathan," he boomed, striding toward me with arms wide open like we were old college buddies. "Look at you, man. It's been ages." I forced a tight smile. "Yeah," I said. He clapped me on the back, the same way he had that night on the porch, the night he told me to grow up. "What have you been up to?" he asked, voice dripping with the kind of performative politeness people reserve for small talk. "Working," I said simply. He laughed, a little too loud. "Still at the shop. Good for you, man. Honest living." I said nothing. He rocked back on his heels, hands in his pockets. "No hard feelings, right?" he said casually, as if he'd spilled a drink on me at a party, "not stolen years of my life. Business is business. Family's family. Business is business. Family's family." Words so hollow they barely made a sound as they fell between us. He looked around, already losing interest, already spotting new, richer targets. "Take care of yourself, Nate," he said, squeezing my shoulder like a benevolent king blessing a peasant. And then he was gone. Swallowed by a sea of designer suits and glittering champagne flutes. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the recycled air, the scent of ambition and empty promises. Then I turned and walked out. Into the cool night. Into the life I'd built with my own hands. For the first time in years, the night felt wide open. Not full of loss. Not full of bitterness. Just, mine. I wasn't the boy who believed in blood oaths anymore. I wasn't the man chasing a ghost of a dream. I was just Nathan. No one's shadow. No one's victim. Just me. And that was enough.